Hello dear friends, and welcome to Greg's Show and Tell. You remember when you were in school and you would have show and tell. You'd bring in an object, show the class, and tell why it was significant or important. And that's what I'm doing here today. I have an object of historical significance. This is a sword. It is a Japanese sword. I'm going to tell you my understanding of this sword's history and its significance and importance in world history, I guess. This sword was retrieved by my grandfather in World War II. My grandfather fought in Okinawa, Japan. His job was to shoot down the kamikaze planes before they hit their targets. And what would happen after the planes crashed, oftentimes, is the American soldiers would go to the plane and loot it. They would even rip out the gold teeth out of the soldiers' mouths. And at some point in this epic adventure of fighting in World War II, my grandpa took this sword from a Japanese soldier. Now, what's really interesting about this sword is that it has blood stains on it. So in some capacity, it was used. Whether that was used to kill an American or Japanese soldier, we can only speculate. Of course, an American could have taken this off a Jap and killed them with it. We just don't know. It's entirely open to speculation, but I find it certainly fascinating that there are the fingerprints that are smeared with blood on this blade. So how heavy is this sword? I'd say under 10 pounds, not very heavy, but not like if you have a baseball bat and you want to swing it, it's not as easily aerodynamic as that. This is a common story. There were many American soldiers who left Japan with swords that looked very similar to this one. So my grandpa had this sword and he brought it back, and it's been in the family ever since. Flash forward to about 1980. My grandpa's passed away at this point. Somehow my grandma got in touch with the consulate for Japan in Chicago, and the news wanted to film this feel-good fluff piece about bringing the sword back to the Japanese. Almost like we're moving on, and this is a beautiful peace offering. This recently happened a few years ago by a guy who returned the sword, but the sword that he had was accompanied with a note that said something to the effect of, "Please return this sword to my family, it is a family heirloom." The American soldier that took the sword, his dream was to bring it back. And so the guy brought it back, it's back in the family, everybody's happy. I think that's a nice case, and it's a very micro-specific case. This sword was not accompanied by any kind of note. Likely, this sword would go to the Japanese consulate and it would just go back to Japan. There are rumblings that this belonged to a higher up family in Japan, but that can't be verified. I don't know that that's true. And it turns out that being based runs in the family, because when it was time to do this news report and bring the sword back, my grandma had a simple message, and that message was, "Go F yourself." Now, that wasn't the actual message. The actual message that she indeed gave was, "This sword will stay in my family and it will be on my shelf until it turns to dust. You, Japs, will never get this sword back." You say, "Oh, that's so harsh. Why would she say that?" Well, let me give you the background of why based grandma had second thoughts. My grandpa fought for years over in Japan. He was gone, absent from the family. My grandma's brother was held as a prisoner, tortured by the Japanese. They lost friends, they lost family. My grandma and grandpa hated the Japanese. Not because of, people today, they hate Russia because my TV tells me I have to hate Russia, therefore I hate Russia. No, they had personal experiences that affected them in a negative way. They lost people, they lost time, they lost mental power. So they hated the Japs. The Chinese, still to this day, hate the Japs for what they did. And I remember when I was little, I went with my grandma to Epcot in Disney World that has all the different countries. And there was a little Japanese flag that was for sale at the Japanese store. And I picked it up and I looked at it. And my grandma picked that flag out of my hand and she threw it back down in its stand. And she said, "We don't ever respect that flag." Based grandma. Now, of course, we like Japan today. Japan is the model for the world. And the Japanese, I've always said, if there's any country you don't want to go to war with, it's the Japanese. They are insanely dedicated, loyal, and will not stop. And the evidence of that is in the first nuclear bomb going off, and they still wanted to keep going. So Grandma essentially told the Japanese, "F you." And as a result, this sword is now in my hands. If the Japanese really wanted this sword back, perhaps we could talk. Perhaps there are some things we could negotiate here. My understanding is they don't do negotiations. So my message to the Japanese is, this sword will remain in the family until it turns to dust. F you. But you know, we love the Japanese. We love them today. But we didn't in the past. And you better not act up again. I just wanted to show you and tell you the story because I find it very interesting. You know, you can have pieces of history and hold it and just marvel at what that item must have gone through in the past and what it must have seen. And that's over now. So anyway, that's it. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye.
I have seen the horrors of thousands of wars throughout history. World War II was no cakewalk, and that is why I'm doing what I can to get us off this timeline and alter the fated course of history to avoid another... What can I do to help you? It's your future I'm trying to save. I require privacy, please.